every single one of you here, you have a way of thinking. Good or bad, you have a way of thinking. Your thinking produces a way of doing, good or bad. And then your doing produces a result, good or bad. So in golf, the swing, if you don't have your thinking right, it produces a swing that produces a horrible result. When you approach your business, every single CEO that I've ever worked with that has gotten his or her company in trouble has a way of thinking. It produced a way of doing. Now, if you're a company, what are the results that I would look at? Yeah, so we're looking at financials. First thing when we go into a company, first for 2 hours, we have to hear their leadership talk about how great they are. And then, once we've been polite enough to sit and listen, then we say, we want to audit your financials. And then what we tell the CEO is, your very best thinking has produced your results. We call that stinking thinking. Why are you trusting you? And it's amazing. What we've learned is a lot of times when we're turning around a company, the CEO steps aside or the senior consultant becomes co-CEO while we're in a turnaround, okay? And a lot of times they step aside and just let us do what we need to do to get it back on track. So a lot of times our thinking comes in and our doing comes in, and so we get the results. But the CEO doesn't want to change his or her thinking. And once we leave, guess what they start doing when they're back in power? They return. And there's a biblical saying that's so true, and it says the dog returns to its vomit. And it's sick, but it's really true. So one of the things and if you change your doing but don't change your thinking, it's temporary. You got to be willing to change your thinking. I mean, think about this. This story gets told over and over and over, but think about Blockbuster. I mean, you didn't go but yeah, okay. I mean, but this is how we used to watch movies, right? You go down a Blockbuster, you get the thing, and you go, and you've maybe heard the story of the Netflix guys when they first approached the CEO of Blockbuster. Blockbuster, one of the richest, one of the most successful. Their team were, billionaires that were at they had it all. And these group of guys that understood how digital's changing things approached them and said, hey, we think people are going to want to watch movies streaming. And they just laughed the guy out of there. It wasn't it was within a year that they started going down and they fired that CEO. And there's a lot of stories. I mean, think about this. Kodak, they ran everything. And people aren't going to go to digital. They like their film. And their whole business, and they tanked they've never fully recovered. You think about Kmart. What happened with Kmart? What happened with Sears? The landscape changed, but they wouldn't change their thinking. When people don't change their thinking, they refuse because of pride and ego. They have to be right. When we go into different cities and we go into a lot of inner cities, and we believe, and we've done, that we can take anybody, if they'll allow us to change their thinking, we can have spectacular results. And for years, we've built coder boot camps. So we take somebody with no background, turn them into a software developer. And I started the first one in the mid-90s, so I started a whole industry, and we put these in colleges and different things. And we knew we could take somebody who's non-productive, change their thinking, give them a success mindset, and then give them a relevant skill set, and the market would eat them up because there's shortages, okay? But you had to change their thinking. So it's the very same thing like if you could take somebody who comes from a very poor neighborhood and you send that kid to Harvard, when he gets to Harvard, he's just as smart as everybody else. That's what we figured out. They change his thinking. So a lot of people would look at them and say, no, they're not. I mean, that's how we used to take factory workers and we turn them into software developers. Right now, they're taking coal miners and turning in parts of the country where it's coal country, old guys like me, and turn them into software developers. It's because there's a demand. But you have to change the thinking, you have to change the doing, and you have to change the results. This is a foundational principle in business. When I don't have a result, and it happens all the time, it's, welcome to being an entrepreneur, I have to be okay being wrong. Now, I could be right and refuse to change my thinking, but I get stuck, so I got to be right, but I'm going to be broke. That's my reward. And this is what you hear from a poverty mind that says, I refuse to change my thinking. And they'll tell you what's what. I can't count the number of family dinners I've had when I have different ideas of how, company I'm going to do or an idea I'm going to do. And remember, this is what I do. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And then I'll have a family member that sits to lecture me on why it can't be done. And, they're bagging groceries. Nothing wrong with bagging groceries, but you know what I mean? Because they have this thinking and they just roll their eyes. And they just think it's impossible. So this is huge. When we're dealing with the person, we're dealing with the company, you have to be able to change your thinking. Now, as a Christian, you know what I say, God, change my thinking. I don't have to be right. Change my thinking. Come in. Now, in the Christian world, we call this the renewal of the mind. That's what it is. But if you're prideful, you refuse this. And I've been dealing with people looking for jobs and changing careers and really doing this kind of thing for now 20 years, volunteering to do it. And every time I meet somebody that's resistant, I just wish them the best of luck, but if they're not willing to change their thinking, I can't help them. Even Tahir, which, Tahir, he was questioning me. And I go, Tahir, we use these strategies every day. Just because you don't know how doesn't mean they don't work. You just have wrong thinking. So he had to change his thinking. Okay? Did I say that enough with the thinking? The reason why I had to say it a million times is because this continues to be the problem. And in the turnaround business, the only good news with this is it's repeat customers. There's companies that we've turned around 4 or 5 times, and it's horrifying because there's a lot of blood that gets spilled when we're turning around companies. We have to make layoffs. Who suffers? The people. Rarely the CEO, but it's over this thinking thing. So I want to talk about, are you okay rethinking your job search game plan? Or if you're an entrepreneur, it's the same thing, it's your customer game. I'm going to cover both because they're all tied together these days. It's not one thing or another, okay? And this is about changing your whole perception about either how to land job interviews or meetings for new customers. This is the strategy. And they're identical. So first thing I want to discuss is in the job search strategy, there's open positions, and then there's companies with needs but no open positions. Okay, and I'm going to and for you, those of you that are freelancers, I'll cover that as well. So if you're looking for a job and you're going out to open positions, one of the things that happens is when you post a position, okay, then you put your wall up because you're going to start getting flooded with resumes and emails and all of that, okay? And you get super picky because you have thousands of people coming to you. Now let me ask you a question. Do only qualified people apply? No, I mean, we could have a posting for a chief financial officer, and we'll get people that say, well, I majored in finance. And, if they're still pointing to college, they don't have experience, when they're still pointing to their major or something like that. It's like, because no one hires, except for the beginning, but after that, no one's like, okay, you went good, but we don't talk about that. We talk about your experience. Okay, so when there's an open position, and when we're posting a position and we have a need or something like that, we probably spend, 10 seconds, 30 seconds looking at a resume. And there's all kinds of screening things that we have. If it's on a job search site, we're looking for keywords and different things. And if it doesn't have that, then it's out. What's worse is when some companies hired a 13-year-old, and I'm exaggerating, but I'm talking about somebody with no experience, and they're the ones that are screening you out. And they're screening you out for dumb reasons. Oh, look at the font. This is not a good, it's an old person, it has to be. Look at this font. Look at this stuff. And they're not even looking at the experience. And as a CEO and as somebody who has worked with a lot of CEOs, and we've hired, those things don't matter. We're like, okay, maybe this person isn't great at doing resumes. Good, they won't leave the company. But do they have a lot of experience doing it? So we're looking at different things, but the people screening, a lot of times, they're not your highest paid people that you have screened, because the higher paid people don't want to sit and look through thousands and sort out the bad and all that. So it's kind of like if you were looking to get a date, and you had one person, maybe there was one girl, and then there's 10,000 guys that we got to go over there, and hey, my name's Gerald, and and you got 30 seconds each or 10 seconds each. That girl would get really picky. That girl would get really picky. You know what I mean? So that's the situation that you're setting yourself up for when you're applying for open positions. Even in the high demand positions like technology, there's still a flood that comes through. Okay. Now, coming from the headhunting world and the recruiting world, and that was my first company, this is not how we get job orders. So in the recruiting world, there's a job order. This is a company that has a position, and then we go find candidates. And in some markets, we go get the orders and then recruit the people. And in other markets, we start out with a person and market them to the companies. It's just like real estate. It's either a buyer's market or a seller's market, and you kind of go back and forth. Okay. What has to change in the thinking is this. Let's talk about what happens before a company opens. So here's a company, and here's when they post the job, and it's open and it's out there. Okay. When the need starts, there's a 6-month incubation period on average when that need starts. So a company doesn't just show up to work one day and say, oh my gosh, we need to hire 3 people. That's not how it happens. You look at workflow, and that's what's going on. And so at the companies you've been on, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, there's more work than we can process. And so there's a period where you start talking about, boy, we're going to have more hours, or whatever. And it slowly starts to build. And it takes about 6 months on average from when the need starts and people start, leaders in the company start noticing it, and they start, what do we have the budget for it, and all these different things before it goes open. When a headhunter is looking for a job order that they're going to go try to fill it with somebody, they're not over here competing with the 10,000 people that are applying. They're over here, and they find companies with needs, and before it ever gets open. So let's say that you do digital content. So you write, you do edit and all that. Okay. So in the content world, this is hot because everything's content now. Okay. So let's say that there's a company, and they're growing, and they have needs that they don't have an open position. Now, when it opens up, everybody all the way to China is now applying for that thing, right? Because distance doesn't matter, okay? But let's say that you're exactly what they need, and you've got the background, and you know, and if they got to know you, they would want you. Okay, let's say it's that perfect fit. And you showed up in this period. And by the way, in business, the same thing is true before companies start looking for services. There's a need that builds up. And so, if they put out the bids, same kind of thing. If they start shopping with everybody, then you're at a disadvantage. But if you happen to get there right around the time that the need's present, but they haven't opened up the gates yet, there's a good chance. As an employer, as somebody who has to interview, it's a total waste of time. We hate it. We hate it. And we like to delegate it so we don't have to spend our time, but then at the same time, we're stuck with the person that's, looking and ruling out, because it's the wrong font or for dumb. I mean, this literally happens. This literally happens, and the geniuses over there that are looking at it, and they think, but they're not, they're not running departments, and so they're looking for different things. Okay? If you showed up and you got a meeting with whoever it is that would hire you, so it could be somebody in marketing, if it's an agency, it could be could be a CEO of a small company. By the way, a small company goes all the way up to 100 million, so it's there's a lot of range there. And you fit the bill, they would hire you. That's how I met my wife. She wasn't out posting on some job thing, but you know what? She was looking for a hottie. Hey, I got to pull out the old pictures. I was looking better, 27 years ago. And, if a whole bunch of guys were lining up, she probably wouldn't have chosen me. But I was the only one at the time. And she, we were at 30 years old both, and she was ready to settle down, and so was I, and that's, but maybe if there was we didn't have this thing, the app thing back then, you just had to go meet somebody. But maybe if I had to compete with, 1,000 other guys, somebody else would have, been, sitting in there. So this concept of finding a way to reach into these companies and set up meetings, whether you're looking for projects or customers or looking for a job, this opens up the door because there's zero competition. And this is how the whole recruiting world works. So what if you changed your thinking, whether you run a business or you're looking for a job, and you started thinking like a headhunter, like a recruiter? You'd have a huge, and what if you ran your business? Think about this. What kind of business are you in?
Marketing consulting.
Okay, so think about, what if everybody that had a need for exactly what you offer, what if they would raise a flag? And it's up there, and you could drive around and you see all these flags. I mean, that would make your job very easy, right? If you are the exact match for kind of what their need, if you showed up at that time, you would be getting business left and right. Same thing with you. Okay, there is a way, and that's what I want to talk about. But you have to be willing to change, and you have to understand this difference between a need and an opening. Once a company gets formal with, we're going to open position, there's a lot of formalities that go in place where certain people aren't even, there's certain ranks that aren't even allowed to interview, because in some companies, HR demands to do that. Okay? But there's no policy that says you can't have a meeting. So there's certain words we don't even use. When companies are looking for certain services, a lot of times they don't even know they're looking for the services. They don't know it yet till they meet the person that offers the solutions. So if you're the kind of person that really understands your segment that you're going after and how to find the needs, and you're right there, it's easy to get the job. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's move on.